everybody. It is Brian, and I am back with another one of my fantastic interviews that we've lined up with people in the industry. This is the BreakSec Education Show, and thank you all for being here. I have with me this week Mary Gardner from Goldiknox. And Mary, thank you for taking the time to come and speak with me this week.
Thanks, Brian. Mary Gardner. I've been in the industry for about 25 years, mostly in management roles. Worked in industries from finance to tech to healthcare. I'm currently working with a company called Goldiknox. We're a security consulting company that's really focused on helping customers achieve right-sized security for their organizations and building an organization that's focused on real security and risk management.
Fantastic.
So thanks for having me.
Right on. Just posting up a link to goldiknox.com on the chat there. And so I had you on because one, we have a mutual friend, and I used to work with her at Leviathan. Amazing individual, far better than I am at most everything, which is why y'all started. I guess the big question for me is, it hasn't, the pandemic. We're coming out of the pandemic. Depending on who you talk to, hiring is good or not good. Why was now the time for you to go ahead and establish Goldiknox? Was it just you felt like it was a good time in the industry, or you were just tired of the corporate life and you wanted to be the navigator of your own boat? What was the impetus to start Goldiknox?
That's a really good question, and I think it's kind of all of the above. The right time. The SEC's really focusing on security in organizations, especially publicly facing, publicly traded companies. And I think between myself, the friend that you mentioned from Leviathan, we found that consulting companies were really lacking in good advice and really focusing on what organizations needed from a security company rather than what they pro forma provided as a consulting company. So I think we're really trying to take a bespoke approach and understand our customers and how we can really help them build a security organization that will meet the needs of their customers and the compliance requirements they have to fulfill.
Right. Okay. So you mentioned SEC. Is that are these the new requirements for like breach notifications or material control, or are there other ones that I was unaware of?
That's primarily the one. They did have a proposal to require cybersecurity educated members of the board on publicly facing boards. They've since rescinded that. They've taken it back and are trying to massage that, I think. I think we'll still see some sort of requirement for board reporting from the SEC, but it hasn't gone through yet. They haven't figured out exactly how to word it.
Right. It sounds great. I mean, having somebody on the board who actually understands security, because it feels like a lot of these boards are just there because either you've invited your friends to hang out with you at your company, or you've paid the toll fee to get into the executive washroom. I mean, why do you think they push that back? Do you think that there was just a lack of people in the information security industry that could be on a board, or I mean,
I think there's a couple reasons. I think one is there is a lack of people experienced in information security that could sit on a board and understand all of the rest of the board concerns. And maybe that's not truly the case. Maybe it's the general feeling among corporations who are trying to find members for their boards. They want well-rounded board members that, will help them take care of their company and be good stewards and help them manage and grow their companies.
Right.
And I think in a lot of cases, from a security perspective, we have a tendency to speak in terms of security jargon, right? Vulnerabilities and breaches and incidents and response and resilience. And that's not always the way a corporation wants to have their board meetings go. So I think it's incumbent upon us, if we want people who care about information security to start speaking the business language and really show that we deserve a place at the board table.
Right.
I know we do, because frankly, I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of security people who are the smartest kids in the room. Not just security, not just information security, but also, they understand finance. I think we have to understand finance and business and technology and product development because of what we do. It's such a broad ranging field. So I think we can speak to it. We just need to convince everybody else we can.
Right. So, you mentioned the language of the board, and I'm kind of interested in that. I'm sorry, we're going a little bit further than what I put on the original Google Notes, but you talk about the language of the board and security people. So I kind of see that. It's like, you've got your levels, you've got your tactical, you've got your operational, you've got your strategic kind of stuff. You've got your, whatever's above strategic. Strategic is fairly broad at that point. But what does the board care about?
Generally the bottom line and any risks that could impact that. When we think about information security risk, it's always top of mind for us because we know what's out there and we know I lost my word. We know the impact it could have.
Right.
And we know that it could be very detrimental. But in reality, we have, boards that are taking care of chains of grocery stores that have slip and fall issues from their customers on a daily basis. So they have hundreds of thousands of potential lawsuits that are also a risk that they care about.
Right.
And we have to understand that and understand where we fit in that business landscape and how we ultimately impact the bottom line. We have to understand that every time we create a policy to require a longer password, we're adding time to everybody who has to input a password 10 times a day, right? We're taking that time from their productivity. So those are the things that the board cares about. They want to understand that we're a business partner. We understand the business and we understand how to enable the business with good security practices, and also that we can speak to them about what we've done to impact the business positively.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And
sort of.
No, it makes complete sense to me. And I don't want to say I've railed against this in other shows, but it's like we don't have a lot of positives that we tend to be able to look at. And I guess if you're on a board and you're always thinking doom and gloom, or you're always expecting the worst, and they're in some ways, some of the board people are expecting cheerleaders and to be behind an idea. And when I think of something, especially at work, and I'm not even at a board level, I'd like to be one day. But when a product team or something comes in and goes, "Hey, we've got this great idea for a floating toilet seat or whatever," and it's like, why? And, a product person or a person who's like, marketing or whatever would be like, yeah, hey, that's great. Yeah, let's do that. Let's sell 1 million, floating toilet seats. And the security person's like, we don't really need a floating toilet seat. I think in some ways, yeah, there's some realism there, or some, I don't want to say grounded or whatever, but security doesn't come off as being overly positive. We're restrictive. We add things. We tend to create stumbling blocks instead of enabling things. I can understand why being on a board, that might be a limiting thing for the company. It seems like that would be best left to legal type folks. Hey, what kind of risk does this cause to the organization? And the lawyers are necessary evils. Security is not in this case. In many cases, they're unnecessary. Where legal and PR would be the people would be like, hey, what is this? How's this going to affect the company as a whole? Instead of those things. I mean, is that how you're seeing it?
I think that can be the I think that can definitely be the way the board sees us, right? We're the Department of No.
Right. Exactly.
We're
Exactly.
we're the reason we can't do things.
Right.
And I think we get a bad rap because honestly, a lot of the security people I know want to help people figure out how to do things securely.
Right.
And what we've got to do, there's a tension between the product people that want to make the floating toilet seat and the security people that want to attach it to the right plumbing.
Right. Right.
Right.
Right.
And I think we have to figure out a way to move through that tension and be a team that functions as a whole.
Yeah.
It's not us and them. It's ultimately, I think what the board wants to see is a cohesive team that's working to build the business and make the business more profitable, because
Right.
you need both sides of that coin. But I think sometimes what the board sees is a brokenness,
Yeah. A lack
or
of
a
alignment.
friction. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you felt that friction.
Yeah. I feel it all the time, and I'm not even on a board. It's like just trying to, get people in a product team to understand, hey, you can't, it's not that you can't do that. It's that you're going, I understand the evil that bad people are going to do with something that might actually be a good thing. But yeah, it's hard, especially, with I deal in IoT security. So privacy, security, the floating toilet seats exist everywhere and everybody thinks they're a great idea. And, it just ends up being a trading game. It's like, okay, you can put that out, but you're gonna run into issues, or at times I've ended up having to leverage legal or PR and say, hey, there's a similar product out there, or there's a real risk of this happening, and sometimes we resort to FUD, and sometimes we resort to things that don't make any sense, or asteroids are going to hit the Earth. We need to worry about that. And I can understand. We've shot ourselves in the foot with that for years. It took us 20 years to get people to adopt really complicated passwords. And then it's like, oh, no, now you need to do, 2FA. And it's like, we just got passwords. So now we need to go to, and we're, anyway.
Yeah.
So,
and
yeah.
It's interesting because, right, you can play the spin game with 2FA, and you can make it. In the past, I've been able to make 2FA a business enabler.
Yeah.
Because you're putting it in place, and you can reduce the times you use the passwords, right?
Right.
And so I think I'm not a marketing person, and I don't want to play one on TV. Please don't make me. But I think it's about how you approach the business when you're saying, hey, look, we need to change because this is going to make it better. If you give them real reasons and show them it'll make it better, you can really get a business win out of it. I've actually had customers send my team thank you notes.
Oh.
And I'm talking executive customers send my team thank you notes for deploying 2FA.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
because we made it simple. We held hands, and we enabled some things we wouldn't have otherwise been able to help them with. So
that's great.
It depends on how you approach things, right?
Right. Yeah.
But that doesn't help with the floating toilet seat.
I have to use that because if I actually mention something, I don't want it to be. I tried to think about the most useless thing ever for an IoT connected device, and a floating toilet seat seems like the most obvious choice there. So, but
it's a good one.
I completely agree. And you mentioned I think before we talked, you've worked with like medical organizations and what have you, and I used to do audits for those things, and one of the biggest things that we saw as problems was password enforcement, because doctors didn't want to have to enter their multi-character password multiple times a day. And to your point, things like MFA or badges or something, some kind of system where they just tap and go, is increases security, and it decreases the amount of mistakes. I mean, there are specific things we can do in security that will help, and things like badging, or that if we can make MFA more seamless, where we're not having a 15-character password that we have to enforce and everything, those are great, and it's great that you could implement that at your organization. It's I don't think we have enough wins like that in an organization from time to time, and it's unfortunate. So
and I think part of it's how we approach things. If the first word out of our mouth is no,
right,
instead of help me understand why,
right,
and how do we get to, it's not even necessarily how we get to yes, but what's the right thing to do for the company and how do we get there?
Right. Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. So I'm going to start off with the bullet point that we have in the Google Doc that kind of leads us to where we're at right now. Security people are not going to be on the board currently. At some point, the SEC will hopefully allow that to happen or find some way to make that legitimate. But I saw a Harvard Business Review article from 2023. I love Harvard Business Review. I don't know why. They just have really great articles. It says boards are having the wrong conversations about cybersecurity. And one of the things that I read in there was they said 69% of board members, responding board members, so they sent out a survey. Board members see 69% of responding board members see eye to eye with their chief information security officers. So just 69%, which I'm thinking that's pretty good. Three quarters see eye to eye with their CISOs. Fewer than half of members serve on boards that interact with their CISOs regularly. 47% serve on boards that interact with CISOs regularly, and a third of those 47% only see their CISOs at board presentations. Is that indicative of what you've seen in your career? Is like, we only see the CISO when either something bad has happened. Again, back to security, we only see the CISO when something bad happens, or is it formal presentations about initiatives or goals for the next year? What is it? Is that indicative of what you're saying?
Yeah, typically it's generally the boards meet quarterly. From a CISO perspective, what I've seen is we generally present twice a year. Mm-hmm. It's a formal presentation, 10 minutes to a half hour on the agenda. and it's very scripted.
Mm, right.
Um, the probably I've worked with 4 boards over the past 15 years, and the most productive board meetings I've had are those where I've established relationships with the board members
Hmm.
outside of the boardroom, i.e., meeting with a couple interested ones monthly so
Right.
that we can go over some metrics, what interests the board, what are the topics they're discussing, and what's hitting the media and how are
Right.
we addressing it as a company. So I've been able to establish that with two boards, really positive, and they were boards that I was able to either whiteboard with, or have involved in tabletop exercises.
Right.
Having board members actually involved with some of the response preparation, I think is really important and really eye-opening. So they get to see what you deal with when you think there's an issue and how you deal with it. So I think the more interested you can get the board members, the better. But I think those numbers are accurate.
Wow.
They're very indicative of what I've seen.
Right. Huh. So okay, so I'm I I'm you have Goldiknox, and I'm going to assume. Please tell me if I'm wrong here. This is a like a virtual CISO thing. So this is for companies that maybe don't have a functional on full time CISO. They're either startup or something like that. That's what I'm understanding?
We do some virtual CISO work. We
Okay.
also, one of my goals is to help a transitional CISO, so somebody that's new to the role or somebody who is moving from one industry to another, help them establish more patterns. But we also do offer the virtual or the fractional CISO services.
Okay. Cool. So you're like a CISO mentor or something like that. You mentor CISOs.
I hope so.
Well, so I
I
was just wondering from a virtual CISO point of view, that relationship must be even more complicated and difficult because you're not really part of the company. It's very similar to, yeah, and I apologize, I only have my own experiences to go on. It's like somebody in the company tells you something's wrong with a system, management's not listening to you, but then you bring in a third party pen testing or security assessment firm who comes in, finds the same thing. They give a $50,000 report, and now management cares. And you're like, hello, I was here the whole time. So, what is for the folks out there like, hey, I think I could be a virtual CISO, or I'm thinking about becoming a CISO. What is it? I mean, what are some of the first things that they can do when they're trying to get in good with the board? Is it definitely meet the board members over coffee somewhere else that's outside the work, or what kind of things can they do to when they hit the ground running, not mess up?
Yeah, I think it's fine to champion on the board. And
Right.
I found them a couple different ways. Number one, through a CFO that I had a really good relationship with, gave me some introductions before the first board meeting so that we could talk through and sit down and walk through some meetings. I don't know that you want to go as informal as a coffee shop,
Right.
but a Zoom meeting, because it's not really, it still has to be a formal relationship because of the oversight. And there's still some stuff that you have to take to the general session of the board rather than just with a couple people. But you can ask those couple people how to approach it.
Right.
What's the
Right.
best way to walk through it? And have a mentor on the board or somebody who can help you understand what that particular board is concerned about. But Generally, I've found those mentors through management.
Mm,
So either working with the general counsel or the CFO, or in some cases the CIO and the CEO. It
right,
it's depended,
right,
but yeah, I would say when you hit the ground and you're going to be in charge of security, you need to establish those relationships both from a board perspective and an executive leadership perspective, because you need to work with everybody on the leadership team. Um, I think all security professionals at some point say security is a team sport.
right.
And it really is. You have to engage the entire company to help make you successful.
Right. So you have to find your cheerleaders, your you have to figure out where everybody is on the spectrum. So you've got your detractors, your cheerleaders, your meh, your people who are kind of middle of the road kind of thing. It seems like being a CISO, it's one of those things that what got you there won't get you here kind of things. Or I know I'm messing that up, but it's like at some point you're going to have to change the way you operate. Being a CISO or being even a director of security, if they don't have a CISO, is on a completely different level than a lot of things that you've been doing. You've made that transition at some point in your career. So, what did you find the most difficult when you made that transition? Like you made the conscious effort, hey, I'm going to be a CISO. And one, I'd love to understand, what motivated you to go that route, and what did you find difficult there, or what did you find easy? And I understand depending on the personality, it's different, but I'd love to hear your insights on that.
So what motivated me? I found myself in management from a security perspective. It's a And I had some really amazing people who served as my mentors throughout my career
Okay.
and sponsors. And they helped me build myself into a director of security or position. And I realized that the next step for me was going to be CISO if I wanted to continue to grow. So my biggest challenge, and it's still a challenge, I'm I am not comfortable in front of big audiences.
Okay.
I am not a natural speaker,
Okay.
public speaker. I like conversations. I like, you know, building a team, but I've had to really work on presence and building the ability to sit in front of a board and not have my heart beat out of my chest.
Okay.
And just finding ways to get through that. And probably the other big challenge I had was taking geek speak and learning how to take that to a boardroom
Hmm.
and make it relevant to the board and to leadership. Uh, the first time I presented to the board, um, I walked in with a presentation and it talked about NIST 1800 or 853 and the 17 control families and the 250 controls. And I'm boring you talking about this. I
No, I'm not
can't
bored.
tell you what the faces on the board looked like. Um, it was it was a hard lesson to learn, but
Hmm.
I think I put most of the people in that room to sleep.
What? So, did I guess the question is, did they ask for that? Is that what they wanted, or is that what? And I'm trying not to sound negative. Is that what you think they wanted?
It's
I
what
guess
I
that's
thought they
reading
wanted.
the room, right? It's reading the room.
Yeah, it was what I thought they wanted based on conversations with my management chain and some of the people who were advising me. I don't think any of us really knew what the board wanted in terms of cybersecurity, right?
Yeah.
This is the 2012, 2013 timeframe.
Okay.
So we were trying to figure it out. And
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to the board about what our framework would look like and what we were
Right.
trying to achieve. And that was way too detailed.
Okay.
They want to know that we understand what our risks are, that we understand where we need security to speak to our customers and enable business.
Right.
And they want to understand if there's any risks that they need to help with. I think ultimately the board really wants to help the security program. They just don't know how.
Right. Right. That makes sense. That makes
So,
sense. That makes sense.
but
Yeah.
yeah, it was at that point in time, it was rolling the dice and seeing what we ended up with and adjusting from there. But
Right.
we adjusted, we made it better. We were invited back to the next board meeting, so it wasn't a total loss.
That's cool. Yeah. 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 I'm not, I think I'm an extroverted introvert. So I have my moments, I have my splashes of energy. My biggest issue, and I probably resonates with quite a few folks here. It's like, you can say one thing, and depending on the audience, it has to be translated 5 different ways. What I might say to a product team won't be what I tell the CISO, and what I tell the CISO is not what the CISO is going to tell the board, or that kind of thing. So it almost feels like a weird game of telephone, where it's like, I have to speak English over here, I have to speak Spanish here, she's going to go speak German to these folks up here, and it's like, okay, well, it's all kind of similar. They got the Romance language thing going on, where you got some cognates, you got some things that say sound somewhat similar, but the message is going to be different. To your point, yeah, it's like they didn't want to know about NIST 800-53. They just wanted to know that there was some kind of risk framework in place, that we were going to implement something. I would imagine that's and same thing. I think with a lot of folks that are upper, lower, middle management like myself. It's like, okay, you have to say the same thing 5 different times or 5 different ways, because the CISO only cares about maybe the not the how, or but maybe I don't know which one of those questions it would be, but it'd be like I've got it under control. This is the what. Okay, this is the what's happening or whatever, but not the how I'm going to fix it. And with the product team, you're like, okay, this is how you're going to have to fix it, or this is how you're going to have to address it, or what have you. And then the board's a completely different what, a more generic what, I think, in that case. But yeah, I think that a lot of people have that issue in our field, and it's a trial by fire, I think. And I think to your story, that's a trial by fire. You're like, okay, I won't do that again, right? A lesson learned. Room to grow, I think. I'm reminding myself of a story that I read where the tenure of a CISO is 2 years, and I've also been told that you really have to be at a job 2 years before you can be considered the owner of the thing. So I'm trying to find out if those two are corollary. It's like, by the time the CISO gets to actually own the program or the project, they're either being kicked out because they didn't get the job done, or they're moving on because something has happened. So what is with the short tenures with a lot of CISOs? Is it because of stress? Is it because they realize that they've bitten off more than they can chew? I mean, and maybe this is just a media story, like we have a talent gap like we had with our recruiter friend a couple of weeks ago. It's like, it's just trumped up metrics where that's what they say is happening. Do you see a lot of CISOs lasting more than 2 years in their jobs?
Not really.
No, come on. Come
I
on.
I'd love to spin a pretty tale that it's all
Oh
a lie
God.
and we find a company and we stay there for life. Um,
Dang it.
the grass is always greener, right?
Oh, okay.
There's always a better opportunity in some cases. I I I probably left one job that I completely loved and I was doing really well to chase the money. And I got offered stupid money, and it was cool. I learned a lot, but I want to go back because I love that job. I love the team I was working with. I love the mission of the organization. And we were making some really good progress.
Right.
But I made that decision. I have to live with it, and you move on. Um, but in some cases, you just end up the CISOs generally buried in an organization, right?
Mm,
They're expected to be an executive, but they're three deep on the executive ladder, right?
right.
They're three levels down. Um, so if you don't like what mom says, go ask dad.
Right.
Um, and you get into that game of telephone. So it can be hard to be in an organization where you're down so far on the chain.
Right.
So one of the things you really have to do is you have to build trust right away
Mm,
because you have to be the authority. So you don't have 2 years to get to own the function.
right. Right.
You have to own the function right away because if the function fails, you're the one that's going to be escorted to the door.
Right. Right. So, some of my leadership classes I learned at the Harvard Business School online was, you're generating trust through either positional authority, which, if you're a brand new CISO, you don't have any positional authority. I mean, well, you do, but it's like you've just been there for 2 weeks. Um, you've got, your reputation. So if you're like a Mudge or Mary Gardner or somebody who's brought in to be CISO or what have you, they may know you because you're a celebrity or a rock star or something like that, which you've got that kind of authority. Yeah. Do you how do you build that trust? Right. I mean, do you know coming in what your playbook looks like? I mean, this probably isn't the first time you've been a CISO or I mean, if you have been, the first time, I mean, what are the things you do to build trust in an organization? Who do you start with first? Do you start with the CEO? Do you start with the folks underneath you? Is it a bit of both?
So you have to start with both. Mostly because when the day is done, if I don't have a team that is committed to working with and for me, we're not going to be successful.
Right.
It doesn't matter what I do, I need that team
Right.
because I can't do it all. So I have to establish trust with the team, and I love the concept of managing up. I think a lot of people say that they're going to manage up. And you can do that, but only if you have a team that trusts you and, you know, that you trust. So there has to
Right.
be that teamwork from a security perspective.
Right.
And once you establish that, then you have to establish the trust among those people that are going to be key to your job. And that's going to be your direct report, who's probably the CIO
Mm-hmm.
or the chief legal officer or the chief financial officer.
Right.
So those are the three places generally the CISO reports. um, I honestly think the CISO at some point needs to be elevated to a position reporting to the CEO.
Right. Right.
They need to have a seat at that table. Um, but you have to establish trust among minimally those three people, because the chief legal officer can be your best friend.
Right.
Um, they're going to help you when there's breaches. They're going to help you when there's issues or incidents. They'll help you understand the regulations that are coming down the pike. Um, and the CFO, generally, most of the regulations are tied to the CFO's office. So, SOX, a lot of the SOC work we do has financial control implications.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important to build trust there. And, ultimately, if the CFO is assisting you in getting budget, they're
Right.
always a good person to build trust with. Um, but ultimately, everybody on the executive team should be somebody you seek to build trust with. The chief people officer is going to be hugely important to you.
Mm.
Um, but one of the things you asked about the strategy of how do you start going about this. I make friends with the executive assistants first and foremost.
Oh yeah.
It
Oh yeah.
it it, it doesn't matter um, who they are, but if you make them angry, you're never going to get a meeting with their exec.
Right. Right.
Treat them well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, they have more power, I think, than the CEO or the CFO or the CRO or whoever. Yeah, yeah. They know where the skeletons are buried. They know, they manage the calendar, that kind of thing. Yeah, they're super powerful people. So,
But
you
also
you
they have the knowledge. They and if you help them, they'll help you. They're
right.
um, amazingly talented, overworked, underappreciated people that just really want other nice people to work with.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. So, kind of going back to what we were talking about with the different messaging and what have you with like product teams and with CISOs and stuff. Your approach to getting things done as a CISO, depending on who you report to, is going to be different. With the CFO, it's going to be numbers game. I need this new box. Well, our systems need to be upgraded to blah. Oh well, we don't got the budget for that. Legal is going to be what kind of damage can this cause the company. I'm assuming that you really have to be like you really kind of have to leave that technical side and be more of a people person, right? People, it feels like you really have to understand and read people properly with that, unless you're marketing CISO or something like that. Did you? I mean, when you're mentoring new CISOs, is that? I mean, what is it? What is it you tell them other than building trust is great, yes, but what do you ever size them up and go, okay, look, you're going to have a rough time of it because you're not this, or you're going to be really well in this job because you can do this. Do you have evaluations with CISO mentors or people that you're working with in transition that you say, okay, you're going to run into this problem with these people or what have you?
Yeah, I try and shoot straight with people, and if I think if they're trying to come across in a way that could be damaging,
Mm,
I'll work with them on that. And new CISOs have to be really open to, I don't want to say being a chameleon, but sort of being a chameleon.
right.
Because you do have to change your tone and tenor depending on who you're dealing with. And it's not just positionally, it's also personally.
Right.
Because I have a tendency to be extraordinarily informal
Okay.
with people. I like going in and telling them the way it is and having an open, honest conversation with them. But it doesn't work with everybody. So
Right.
I have to adjust. It's not incumbent on the people I'm going to talk to adjust to me. It's incumbent on me to understand and read people like you were talking about. And
Right.
sometimes it's hard,
Yeah.
you know. But one of the things I tell people is if you're walking into a conversation that's going to be crucial for your career or your project, talk to people who know that person. Get advice, understand what they like, what works, what doesn't work. Talk to people who report to them. But do your homework. A lot of it's about, just really doing homework and understanding approaches. The other thing is you have to be willing to listen to the advice.
Right.
People have cautioned me about walking into the room with somebody and given me some really great advice that I didn't listen to, and I'm still regretting that. So, listen to the advice people give you.
Is it one of those things? Check your assumptions at the door. Check that ego, because if you think you're hot shit, you're gonna find out pretty quickly whether or not you are, kind of thing.
Oh yeah,
Okay. All right.
yeah. And I think probably another piece of advice I give is for the first 30 days, ask questions and listen.
Hmm. Right.
There is nothing so um there's nothing people like less than somebody who comes into a situation without understanding it and making proclamations.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's been my experience that, yeah, you listen, you observe, you ask questions, and then, like any new leadership, you're going to have to do a reorg at some point, because that's just kind of how everything works. That's kind of the playbook to, you found inefficiencies, so you have to fix those inefficiencies, or, especially, below, not necessarily above maybe, but it's been my experience anytime new management comes in, there's going to be a reorg in anywhere between 3 to 6 months. So kind of expected. At least that's how it's been where I work right now. And I guess it depends on the type of projects the people are working on. But yeah, it's been my experience that reorganization, realignment is the way. So. I mean, that's been my experience. Is there a CISO playbook like that? Because there was a joke. It's like, you spend the first 30 days, getting to understand the ropes. You're gonna, try to implement something with a reorganization, and that's where the joke of the 2 years came from. It's like, by 18 months in, you realize that there's a problem, and that you can't fix, and then by 2 years you're out. But I had a point and I lost it, and I don't know what that is. Are there things that are expected of you from the CISO role? I guess is a thing. Are you always expected to do a realignment or a reorganization, or have you actually seen where, hey, everything's going good? It seems to me if they've hired a brand new CISO, they want to put their paint job on the car, so to speak. So, I mean, is that typical behavior?
It's typical. The the two times I've walked into a well-formed security team, in one case, the security team actually had been reporting up through IT,
Oh,
and the CISO had been reporting into legal. So the security team didn't report to the CISO. So when I came
oh,
in,
hmm.
we collapsed them.
Okay.
Um, and there were some minor tweaks that I made, but for the most part, I had a green field.
That's
So
nice.
yeah, I think we brought in one, maybe two managers and a program manager, but we were able to really work with what we had and add some staff and augment some functions. In the other case, um, the team was pretty functional. I made a couple changes, adding a GRC role that was in-house instead of outsourced. Um, but the other two CISO positions I've been in, really, we built the organization from the ground up. So it really didn't exist before that, before I joined. So we were able to do greenfield work. I think every CISO has their optimal organization, and that's the blueprint you carry with you, and you change it depending on the organization you're in. Um, do I build a SOC internally or do I outsource?
Right. Right.
And normally I outsource that
Right.
function, but depending on the company I was with, I would leave that option open to build
Very cool.
in-house.
Okay.
Um, but I've never had somebody tell me I needed to build it this way
Right.
or I had to dismantle this. Um, I've made, I've absolutely made personnel changes within the first 60 days,
Yeah.
but everybody's going to because it's needs, wants.
Right. Well, I mean, they hired a CISO for a reason, and it was either because the security team. Yeah, I find it hard to believe a CISO's leaving if they, well, like you said, you were chasing heinous money, but there's going to be things that they're going to find in there. Hey, why are you doing it this way? Why are we doing
Mhm.
all this stuff manually? Why are we well, that's just because of the way we've always been doing it. Okay, well, is there a way to automate this, or is there a way to do these things? Or hey, I know about this technology that y'all don't have that you probably should have that I used at my other company, which may or may not work here, or that kind of thing. So makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah, and I think the I think those changes definitely happen over the course of 6 to 12 months, maybe not in the first 90 days though. But
Right.
if we're we're not given a directive to go in and wholesale change everything.
Right.
Um, but yeah, you always find inefficiencies or things you want to change when you move into a new position. I think
Sure.
that's true of everybody.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you clear cut everything, you're going to run into things like org goals or things that have been established that are going to get into jeopardy. So it makes sense. Yeah, you want to know where to make your cuts. You want to know where to add on, where to graft new capabilities or technologies, that kind of thing. And I guess that's part of the whole trust generation thing. You have to listen to the people who actually maybe need those things and have been asking for them for years and haven't been able to get them. So part of it is working with your teams to understand that.
And one of the things there are certain people that I will always try and tempt to come with me
Ah,
when I find a new gig,
right.
and just figuring out how to, and it's because we've developed a long-standing trust relationship, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Um, so those are some of the things that I'll look for when I start with a new organization is who do I need and are there places where I can use these people that have helped me succeed in the past?
Nice.
And I think
Nice.
that's true of everybody. We want to have our tribe.
Right. That makes sense. Um, so I wanna kind of steer back to a couple of things that you know, asking about. So you've worked with boards. You're probably working with some boards right now. Um, what, in generalities, if you can, what are boards most worried about these days? Is it the AI stuff? Is it trying to figure out how to stay, relevant with that new technology? Do a lot of them even care, or are they just trying to figure out how to, productize it? Is there, what is the things that are keeping the boards up at night now?
So it depends on the industry.
Right.
Um, but I think if you're talking about tech or manufacturing or any company that has intellectual property to
Okay.
protect, it's definitely AI is definitely on top of their minds.
Right.
I think the other thing is just an assurance of resiliency.
Resiliency.
You know, ransomware, well, the ability to keep managing through an attack,
Okay.
whatever that is, or keep managing through a loss.
Right. Right.
So do boards are definitely concerned with the ability to maintain the corporation through a ransomware attack, through a, a breach. How do we handle a breach? How do we respond to a breach? Um, and what are the repercussions if we do have a breach, right? Especially with the
Right.
SEC breach rules. I think boards are struggling with how to define material
Mm.
because it's not just a number.
Right.
Um, you know, if you're a business that has uh, reputational impacts, what happens if your reputation is damaged to the point that you're losing business?
Right.
That becomes material, but it becomes material over time. So how do we set up those triggers to know when a breach is material and when we need to report?
Right.
I think the other thing is boards are concerned about whether or not they're getting a real picture of the risk of cybersecurity threats, right? Especially
Hmm.
after the Uber
Right. Oh yeah.
situation.
Right.
Is the CISO reporting to us accurately? Do we know everything that's out there?
Right.
Um, and I think the board's going to have to look and see whether or not they have the right reporting relationship to establish that trust with the CISO. So the CISO does have an open chain of communication to the board without, a stop in between for executive management,
Mm. Okay.
or maybe not without a stop, but with the right stops in place.
Right. Right. Huh. So has has
That
the Uber thing really damaged the CISO role that badly? That sounds scary. Like we can't recover from that. I mean, it's been what, three,
oh,
4 years since that happened?
So it's been 3 to 4 years since that breach happened, but I believe the prosecution was just in the last year, 2 years.
Yeah.
So I think
They handed down. Yeah.
it was the prosecution more than the breach that brought it to everybody's attention.
Okay. Yeah. 3 years probation for covering up data breach involving millions of Uber user records. Yeah, that was Friday, February or May 5th. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that was terror bad. I think from a CISO point of view, but yeah, I guess. So
I think
what do
it's
we do?
recoverable though,
Right,
because we can't all be painted with that brush.
right, right. So is it just a bunch of dashboards and metrics, or obviously they don't want dashboards and metrics, they want, some fairly generic things, but that's one of those fine lines, right? We can give them 800-53 and all 17 articles and config, and they're like, they start glazing over. But they probably don't want a ton of metrics that, they want to be told a story, but, so it seems like there's a happy medium there. Again, that's one of those trial and error things, I guess, that you're gonna find out either you've done really poorly this month and you'll improve next month, or I guess there's always room for improvement. So.
Well, and if you're doing it right, you're having the conversations to understand what they want before
Right.
you even walk into the room. And that was my big failing, because I never met with the board before I presented to them in that particular case. But when you meet with the board and you understand what they're looking for, and whether or not they understand what you've presented, it helps a lot.
Yeah.
The other thing is you can't expect it in the full board meeting. So having those 2 or 3 advocates on the board that will give you honest feedback is really important.
Right.
Because the full board isn't going to spend the time to have a feedback session with you.
Right.
Which
Right.
is unfortunate, but it's just not the way it's going to happen. So
Right.
having a few champions on the board is really important.
That's cool. Yeah. Plus, at those board meetings, I'm guessing the CISO isn't taking up the entirety of the time. You get maybe 2 or 3 slides, if that, and a handful of minutes to be able to go, okay, this is what we're doing. Or was, I guess in the case of the NIST 853 story, it was a meeting for the CISO to talk about those things. But I would imagine in most board meetings, you only get a handful of minutes and a slide or two to be able to go, okay, this is what we're doing.
Yeah, in the NIST 853, that was my introduction to the board.
Okay.
So that was actually an hour long, which was time not well spent. But generally, standard board meeting, you get anywhere between 10 minutes to a half an hour.
Oh, that's not too bad, I guess.
No, it's a half an hour is great. And if they're engaged in asking questions,
right,
that's the best of all possible scenarios. Because if they're asking questions, they're understanding what you're saying. And that's a really good indicator of whether or not you've hit your mark.
Right. I guess it's, you have to figure out how much content you want to put in. If you put in 10 minutes of content and have 20 minutes of questions, that's great. But if you put in 10 minutes of content and you get 3 questions, you're stuck there with another 20 minutes and you're like,
yeah.
So either you did a really good job of explaining everything in 10 minutes, or they didn't understand a thing you were saying and don't even know where to start asking those questions. God, now I don't want to be a CISO. This sounds too nuanced for me. I can't handle
Brian,
this.
You need to be a CISO.
No.
You're asking the right questions.
Nobody wants me as a CISO. I'm upper lower middle management. You have no idea. So
upper lower middle management is kind of what we all are, I think.
There's always somebody above you on the rung on that ladder, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, I guess one of the last things we get, to segue into that is when do you when should somebody feel confident that they could be a CISO? Because I know people who are CISOs of companies where they're like employee number two, and you're like, are you really the CISO because you're also the head developer, janitor, caterer, head of development, IT person, that kind of thing. You're in, okay, you have CISO in title, but it's like, when is the time to make the jump? Is it like, hey, I'm tired of being a technical person. I want to go and be a people person now, or I'm not starting to feel this. It's like the imposter syndrome in me is like, I don't even know if I could even be a CISO at this point. Who would want me? And what does a skill set look like for somebody like that? I guess I'm asking maybe a question. I don't know if it's the right question.
So, a couple things, but I'm going to step back a minute because
please do.
I don't want to paint a picture of doom and gloom for a CISO.
Wait, we started with doom and gloom.
Well, look, this is probably, I started out my life as a biologist, right? And I made several career hops and I found security.
Okay.
And I love this job. I love the challenges. I love the fact that every single day I have to use a different skill or use a skill that I've grown in a different way. And it's not just a technical skill, but it's also the people skills.
Right.
I think there were two questions that I think I'm going to tease out of what you asked. The first one is, a lot of times people get a CISO role along with a lot of other stuff.
Right.
So they're doing the function of information security and they get that title. I think you have to honestly ask yourself, does my CISO role conflict with any of the other hats I have to wear?
Right.
And if it does, it could be problematic. I've been in a position where I was for all intents and purposes, a CISO. A person in the IT department left, and I was asked to sit in their chair.
Right.
And I said, I will do it, but you have to understand that it conflicts with my CISO role.
Right.
So there are going to be times when I ask somebody else to help advise me of something because I can't make that decision.
Right.
Because there's a conflict of interest. And it's not fair to anybody. So that's one thing. But the other thing is, from a personal perspective, I don't know anybody in this role. Well, I do know a couple people. I'll take that back. But I think everybody struggles with imposter syndrome at some point. This is a big role. I mean, we used to joke that information security was an inch deep and mile wide.
Right.
To be good at this role, you now have to go at least 6 inches deep and a mile wide.
Right. Right.
Or you have to be able to build that team. I think you're ready for the role if you're ready to stand in and take the hits and answer the hard questions. If you want to lead a team, because you have to lead the team, you have to be transparent with them, you have to let them know what's going on, and you have to grow them. I think that's probably a mistake I've made in the past, is when I had the opportunity to take somebody into the board meeting with me, I haven't done that. And that's a great growth opportunity for people. But I think if you go in every day to play with the technology, you don't want to go to a CISO role yet.
Right.
When you get past the point of wanting to be that hardcore technologist that's figuring out how to solve everything with technology, wait a couple years and
Okay.
then see if you change your mind and you really want to work with people more.
Right.
Um, I think it's a great place to be because there's nothing better than seeing somebody's eyes light up when they understand.
Right.
And you can do that with your team, you can do that with leadership, and you can do that with the board.
Very good. Okay. Okay. Yeah,
Is
it's kind
that
of yeah. That makes 100% sense. When I was working at CrowdStrike, I've told this story, I think even to a couple of folks who are on our stream here. I realized that I did not have the mentality to sit for 12 hours at a computer trying to get a shell or to try to, do pen testing or red teaming or what have you. And I realized, well, okay, I probably should like move to a PM type management role, which is why I ended up at Leviathan with our friend. And it I'd like to think I'm good at being a PM, but yeah, I've found myself at a crossroads, because I'm now colonoscopy years old, and I realize that you gotta do something right with your life. I've got to grow up and do something. So it good feedback. I appreciate that, and there's a lot of folks who say, yeah, they're willing to take those punches and willing to, take those hits until they actually end up having to do so. And I think that's where you prove your mettle, right? If you'll find out at your first board meeting if you get your ass handed to you and you're like, well, okay, this was awful, or what have you. But yeah.
I think
So
maybe
go
another
ahead.
key there is um, you don't necessarily treat your mistakes as failures.
Oh,
You understand that they're learning opportunities, they're ways to get better.
okay. Okay. You mean like Edison, I didn't fail at making a light bulb. I just figured out another way of not making a light bulb, or it's set in context, right? So, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. Okay. Well, wow. Time does fly when we're having fun. I want to talk a little bit about Goldiknox again. I mean, I'm on your website and it's got a very hypnotic background, which I love. And you're doing a lot of different services for enterprises, startups, which is something I've actually, one of the things moving to San Diego, we have a fairly healthy startup community down here, and I was like, oh, I'd love to, be a really cheap security advisor to some of these folks and whatever. And um, uh, when you're talking to startups, you've got cyber liability audits and certifications. They must come to you as a startup at some point and go, okay, we've got a customer that's asking questions, about how we're storing data or something. I'm assuming at some point a startup will come to you and go, okay, we've reached a point where people are actually asking about security. And I don't know if it's actually gotten lower in the initialization phase or the unicorn phase, before Series A or whatever. Have you noticed, from a Goldilocks point of view, when they've started asking about security, is it become sooner rather than later in this journey?
Absolutely. And one of the things, so people are more and more concerned as products are more um, software as a service,
Right.
about making sure that their data is secure. And there's more certifications for those types of providers. When people were buying software and just deploying it in data centers themselves, I think there was less concern about that. But
Right.
now that I'm trusting my data to the service, I have more concern about that. So I would, as a CISO, I would ask earlier in the process,
Right.
for a SOC 2 or something like that. Um, and I think for many providers that are offering SaaS services, it's actually a deal ender if they don't have a SOC or a SOC um, 2 type 2. I
Hmm.
know there's been companies I wouldn't do business with because they didn't have a SOC.
That makes
Um,
sense. Yeah.
but yeah, so it's definitely earlier, and I would, I this is me being a salesperson without my sales hat on. Um, the earlier you bring a security advisor in, especially if you're building a product, the better you are. Because if you build those controls in from day one, number one, you don't have to retrofit them later. They're not as expensive. Number two, you establish good practices right up front.
Right.
And our friend that we've mentioned from Leviathan is really good at advising on those services from a software
Oh
delivery
yeah.
perspective.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's one of our shared passions is
Right.
making sure we're building better software.
That's awesome. I also, just looking at your partnerships on your page, I also know one of the other companies there that is um, pretty good too. So yeah, I think yeah, I think it's good to have good partnerships. It's good to bring in security as soon as possible, but it obviously shows due diligence, right? When a company's like, hey, when you're self aware enough to go, maybe we should have security. Maybe we should talk to somebody about that S word before, maybe even before somebody customer comes in and goes, hey, we want to give you, millions of dollars, but we need this. So having that proactive approach is, I hope it's something you see a lot of, and not like, oh my God, we need to do this now, and we've got something coming up in a month or whatever. I bet you get those too, but I imagine the more proactive approaches are always the ones that end up being better for you. So
Yeah. And, it's customers have a lot more leeway when a company can say, we're in process with our SOC 2 type 1.
right, right,
If you can say that as a company, most of your customers will say, oh, okay, when's it due? Great. And
right,
they now have a path forward,
right, right. Very
especially if
nice.
you can say we've already, engaged somebody's services, we have an audit company on the line.
Yep, yep. Makes sense. Yeah. I'm going to ask any last questions. Any questions from the chat before we go? Any questions? Last call. Because uh, Mary's time is not billable here, but it should have been. We should have made this billable time for her. So, yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna call it. Mary, Goldiknox seems to be going well. Okay. So one of our friends, GoPro Sloyo, says, "What kind of do you do fractional type CISO work? Is fractional different than virtual?"
I don't necessarily consider it much different,
Okay.
but it's providing services for part of a week. Yes, we do.
Okay. Okay. Very
It,
cool. Very nice. Um, yeah. Yeah. GoPro. Check out goldiknox.com, man. If y'all need anything, amazing people who work there, by the way. Mary, if people wanted to talk more about being a CISO, or hey, I think I could be a CISO, please mentor me, or whatever, how would they get a hold of you? How would they contact you?
email mgardner
Okay.
at goldiknox.com
Okay.
and my LinkedIn profile. And that's pretty much the best ways to get a hold of me. If they wanted to call 206-218-6900.
Okay, very nice, very nice. Other than LinkedIn, are you on any social medias or anything like that?
I am not
Twitter,
a very active
Mastodon.
poster on social media.
That's fine.
Um,
It's probably for the better. It's just another point of stress. You've already got enough being a fractional CISO and auditor and all this stuff, so you don't need the social media stuff as well. So that makes sense. So
well, somebody told me a very long time ago, when you put something out there, it's really hard to get it back.
oh yeah, yeah. That's true.
So, my cat has a Facebook account. Occasionally she will post something, but that's about
Aw,
it.
that's fantastic. Yeah. Yeah, my cats are actually surprisingly gone. I would have brought Mama Kitty on here and let you check out Mama Kitty, but very nice. Cool. Well, yeah, like I said, check out Goldiknox. I'd like to thank Onyx for reaching out and saying hey and making this happen. Very happy to have met Onyx and yourself, and I wish you all the best and hope for continued success for Goldiknox, and we'll definitely have to have you all back on at some point in the near future to talk about some other things, some compliance, some GRC stuff. I'm all in on that stuff. I've actually changed how I feel about GRC now in the past few years on this. So. Very cool. So, Mary, thank you so much for being here. Yeah, that was it for breaking security, breaking education this week. Mr. Betcher can be found at Betcher Pwned on Twitter, BoeTTCHERPWNED. Miss Berlin, who would have been here except she's entertaining people who came in for the solar eclipse tomorrow, can be found at InfoSystir, INFOSYSTIR. She also runs the nonprofit Hackers Health, which does villages at conferences for bringing awareness to mental health issues, and you can find that at on Hackers Health on Twitter as well. And you can find me on Twitter, Brian Brake, and you can find me on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/IN/BrakeB. So it's really easy to find. But that was it for Breaking Down Security this week. Hope you have a great week. Thank you again, Mary, for your time, and appreciate
Thanks,
that
Brian.
so much. And, take care of yourselves. As we're fond of saying here, you're the only you have. And we will talk to you again soon. Bye, y'all.